Very proud of my my fake backdrop right now.
Yeah, it's not fake. It's actually really real, isn't
It
it?
is very real, but it
We're
feels
both
fake
kitchen.
too.
We're kitchen time
Yeah,
here.
we could do a show about kitchens.
Yeah.
All right, ready? Welcome everybody back to Soccer Wise. David Goss, Jordan Angeli with you to break down all things NWSL here on a Wednesday afternoon. Our new start time here, starting a little bit later than normal. Jordan, we weren't sure about that. We were talking earlier in the day about when to start. And I have just recently moved to Miami. By recently, I mean like in the last few days.
Welcome
And I went
to
into
Miami.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel. Went into a breakfast place today and was asking questions as I do, like being a classic like New Yorker-y dad guy. I'm like, oh, what does this mean? What's that? What's that? And I asked the question about Cuban coffee.
Woo!
So that's what everyone says. I have read about it because I didn't experience it yet. And it was like, oh, they mash sugar into the beans before they brew it, and that's how they make it. And I was like, oh, so the whole thing's about sugar? Why does everyone act like it's so intense and it's so strong? So I said some of this to this guy, and he's like, oh, I can make you one. And like I had already ordered an Americano, and he was like, here, have this coffee. And then he had made one, so he had to pour it out.
Okay.
Because they pour it in the mini cups. Have you
Yeah,
done
they're
this
smalls.
before?
Yeah, they do it all the time at Vista.
Okay. So, so they give the mini cups. So then he's got to like give them out to everyone because it takes 87 mini cups to get rid of a cup of coffee. And I drink it and it's like instant. It is so strong.
Yes.
And so that was at 7:15 this morning, 7:30. And like it finally wore off in the last 60 minutes. I have been chugging water all day to like flush it out of my system. So when you were like, oh, maybe we'll push back a little bit, I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Because
Yeah,
I'm
perfect.
losing my mind right now.
Perfect. That sounds great.
Exactly.
Yeah, they do it at Vista, and we have the 10 p.m. game most weekends. Well, every Saturday night I'm on a 10 p.m. game. And they brought it in the other day, and it just smells so good, though. You
Yeah,
know,
it does.
Cute with the sugar and the coffee, and it's just like, I want to drink this. And I took a sip, and I was like, no, I don't. Like,
Not happening.
I immediately was like, whoop, I'm awake. And I think that's enough for me, because if I drink any more at 10 p.m., I will be staying up until my flight
You'll go to
leaves
sleep
at
on
8
Monday.
a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I said something to him like, oh, it's really because I'm not the biggest coffee drinker, but I do drink
Okay.
coffee. It's become part of my schedule. And I enjoy the like hot beverage. I drink coffee often on this show because I like to have a lot of times though it's decaf. I like to have the hot beverage. I like bitter, so I don't mind that, but I don't really like coffee drinks. Like I don't get milks and creams and all that stuff in it. So I said to him like, well, so people don't sip coffee? And he was like, oh, well, you can put it with a bunch of milk and make it like a full cup of stuff. And it's like, oh, so you're going to give me heart racing caffeine and then a bunch of dairy? That sounds like a worst case scenario. This was not made for me. And now I know. So September 18th was my first and last Cuban cafecito. And now we move from there. How was your weekend? How were your games overall?
Yeah, it was good. I had a 1-game weekend, so it was pretty chill for me. And it was a fun game. I had the San Diego game. Like, welcome back to NWSL San Diego. They came in and marked some territory, and it was fun to call them just a little bit of a revival for them after what has been a very difficult season. So I think that was it. It was nice to watch. Then I had time to watch a lot of other games.
Nice.
But I also had a Sunday where I was already back home and got to experience a day on the weekend with my family, which was nice.
That is very nice. I'm glad to hear that. It was an interesting weekend in MLS across the board.
In NWSL, you're
Sorry.
speaking in MLS.
Yeah, I'm literally editing MLS stuff on the side right here, and my head is all over the place.
That coffee, man. is
Yeah, that
still
coffee
working,
has
I
sent me
think.
for a loop. But three Friday games, Saturday, then a Sunday early game, and then a Monday night football game, which is the weirdest thing that could possibly happen. So it was a bizarre one, but it was impactful as we expected. The topsy-turvy continues. The insanity is there. We're going to dig into all of that here on the show Today, we've got Orlando, Kansas City, of course, the rematch, the big game this weekend. We will dig into that. We have to talk about the trouble in Portland. 4 straight losses for the Portland Thorns coming out of the Olympic break for a team that I think had a lot of promise under Rob Gale, a lot of excitement. The playoff push continues. It was Seattle as the golden child the last 2 weeks. It is Bay FC and Louisville. I think today, those are the ones I've anointed in there. So we will talk about all of that. CONCACAF W Champions Cup action continues this week. There are games tonight and tomorrow night. So we're not going to dig in as deep because there's not as much time there, but we'll talk, of course, about Portland, who will be playing in that. And then the U20 Women's World Cup, the semifinals tonight. So we don't have a ton of time to preview that one, but the quarterfinals. I mentioned it on the show on Monday. Jordan, I didn't get to watch this live because I fell asleep.
Chills again.
Yeah. How did you experience this? And what do you make of, like, you've talked about the U20 World Cup, the experience you had for these players to sort of live through this?
It is. It's so cool. I didn't catch the game live either, but when I saw the highlights and the comeback and the videos of the coach talking to the team about that was the most incredible thing she's ever seen. I was like, this is American spirit. Like, you are down and out. You're 2 goals down late in a game and you find a way.
Yeah.
That is exactly what this country in women's sports and women's soccer specifically has been built on, of just believing in themselves. And it felt like a really big moment for not just the people celebrating, but for the youth club or the youth teams to get everything back on track, because it hasn't been great over the last few years. And now they get themselves in a semifinal, so guaranteed 2 more games. It just is, it makes me so happy. These are memories that they are going to remember forever. I think this is a memory that a lot of people are going to remember about when the 20s performed a miracle. And it just makes me so happy, and it should be a fun semifinal.
It's not, none of this is a perfect science. You don't go from 20s to the full team and everything's exact,
Right.
But international soccer is different and it's weird. And one of the big things about international soccer is it's single elimination. It's not about flow and form and style. It's about moments.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what this team has learned in having back-to-back games go into extra time and then one go into penalties. And if anyone's listening that doesn't already know, the U.S. was down 2-0 to Germany. They scored in the 97th and 98th minute to equalize. Ali Sentnor, the Utah star, the number 1 draft pick, scoring the second of those goals. Like, that's the learning experience, which is you're never out of it. You have no idea what's going to happen. But if you put your head down and stay focused and have that belief and that team spirit, which you talked about, which has elevated U.S. teams in the past in moments when maybe they weren't the best soccer team on the field or weren't playing the best, that's a lot of the learning experience of a tournament like this. Colombia has been a phenomenal host. Colombia fell in the quarterfinals. Linda Caicedo went. Like, they have been must-watch television, both around the world and especially in Colombia. The stadiums have been sold out for them. That's really exciting. That's been cool. I think Ecuador was just announced as the next Copa America women's host coming up in 2025, so next summer. So a cool moment for soccer in that area as well. But it's been a really fun tournament. I love having something like this, which is like, we don't really cover it. So it's like, oh, I'm sitting around, nothing to do. There's games on. Like, let me throw a game on and watch and sort of just enjoy the sport and stuff like that. It's been really fun to watch over the course of the last few weeks. But let's dig into NWSL now. And of course, we're going to start with Orlando against Kansas City, the rematch. This was the big game. It obviously a little bit of a less shine with Kansas City struggling, but coming off the win against Utah, going down to Orlando, trying to finally knock off this Orlando team and get revenge for the Marta celebration and everything else that happened. And it was, I think, good moments for both teams. It ends in a 0-0 draw, a little bit unexpected. In watching this game, what did you make of what was different or similar from the first time we watched these teams match up?
First off, I would have taken a 2-2 draw.
Yeah.
These two teams.
Also, we specifically said we wanted a draw last time so both teams could remain undefeated. They didn't do that, and now they give it to us this time.
Yeah. And there were really good opportunities for both teams to score in this game. I think my first first thought is both of the goalkeepers made incredible saves. A little bit more for Kansas City. Why am I blanking on her name?
Schultz?
Yeah, Schultz to keep them in it, made really, really good saves to stop Orlando and Banda and McCutcheon at times. But the biggest change I noticed, and Goss, I think that both teams are very aware that Shawinga, Banda, what do they like? They want space in behind. And so to me, it really felt like it was a back four and then 6 players who had a little bit more freedom to go attack. And the opposition or the team that was defending at that time would keep Banda high or keep a couple of players high. So it was really like, we're sticking with our back four. We're not really asking. I don't think either team asked as much as they normally do of their outside backs to enter and join into the attack, because they were saying, okay, if there is a transition moment here, all we're going to do is we're going to drop behind the ball and we're going to let Shawinga, we're going to let Banda dribble at us, and we're going to have pressure, we're going to have cover and a little more cover. And I thought that is where this game, if you're a spectator watching this game and thinking, oh, this is going to be a high-scoring game, that's what slowed it down, is the good defensive principles and the good defensive tactics of both of these teams, because that really did help. And one last thing on the defensive side of things, I thought Corey Dyke was unreal. Player of the game, playing outside back. This is a center midfielder by trade. I've known Corey since she played here for me when she was 10 years old. She is a center midfielder, knows the game, but that is what Seb Hines has done in Orlando. He picks footballers and he says, can you fill in at this spot because you're going to be really good on the ball when we need to build out. So Corey Dyke is there, good defensive responsibilities, but can keep the ball in really good in pressing moments from the opposition. The same that we're seeing from Haley McCutcheon. She's originally a center midfielder, played mostly outside back her whole entire career, but was stellar in the midfield and has been for the last few games. So, kudos to Corey Dyke because she rocked it.
I think it's something you see similar with both these teams in this game, which was the way they balanced the two sides of the field, right? The difference in responsibility for this Orlando team between Abello and Dyke, of Dyke being a bit more possession and play through and slide in as the third center back or step in as the third center mid versus stay wide and dominate the sideline. We associate Kansas City with 2 fullbacks who do that. They chose to step away from that in this game, as you said, to be a little bit safer. So pushing ball out to the right back spot more naturally as center back, it shifted their shape, pushing up that left side, and it gave a different look. I don't mind that. I talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago with Louisville before the Peterson trade, of like how you knew Millett was going to be the one to attack and left back was going to be stay home. I like some of that predictability for my own team when you play the game, of like sort of understanding where the space is going to be and where it's going to flow. And I thought it was really comfortable for both these teams in this game. I thought the other thing that this led to was, even though the raw numbers weren't that high, I thought the quality of possession for Kansas City was better than we've seen over the last few months. I thought playing Prince as the quote-unquote center forward and her ability to drop off and pick up the ball, and then Debinha could float and Shawinga could float, but all of them seemed to look more to find options to feet rather than always put their head down and drive forward. I thought there was a development there for KC of like, they could win games with the ball. It looked like the way they played in this, and they had the best chance of the game coming from Shawinga. It was a direct moment, but it came through a flow of like lulling Orlando a little bit more to sleep versus the last matchup in the first half of the year, which was Kansas City was just playing with their hair on fire and hoping everyone played that way and waiting for chances to fall for them.
And I think Orlando was a lot more meticulous about where their line of confrontation was and how stretched out they got between their midfield and their back line. So they gave more space to Kansas City in certain areas of the field, definitely in front of their midfield line, making them play in that space and say, okay, if you're going to find Prince's feet, then we can double or we can get pressure on that. But yes, Kansas, I thought, did a really good job of finding where the space was. They also utilized Ellie Wheeler as a winger. And I think that this was interesting by Vlatko Ananovsky because she has more of a defensive presence in that winger role, so she could track Abello. But then it also gave them the upper hand in the last moments of the game because you bring in Bia, you bring in Michelle Cooper at the same time.
Yep.
And now you have your front line of how you want it to be. Shawinga, Bia, Cooper with Dabinia underneath. Now you're getting those players, especially Cooper and Bia, minutes at the same time. I mean, I don't know if they said there was something wrong with Cooper, but I think in my mind, Vlatko's thinking, these players have not played a lot together. They need as many minutes together as they can. So I'm going to hold back Cooper, utilize her speed, pace, creativity in the final third for the last moments of the game when she has my number one front four alongside her.
I think what we've seen from Cooper as well this year is when she's been at her best, finding the game, freestyling a little, it's a lot of what Dabinia does as well. And I think it was dangerous to go to Orlando and play two players like that, where you're licensed to float and find the game. You can't have two players in a group against a squad like Orlando that's going to take advantage of any of those mistakes or lack of spacing. It will be interesting to see how Cooper gets back into this team now if Bia is fully healthy. There's a numbers crunch, which is great for Kansas City, right?
Yeah.
They've dealt with injuries the whole year. Like, that's what they're looking for. But it is something Vlatko's going to have to deal with in a different challenge from what he's had to deal with so far, which is how to cover the injuries that they've had. On the flip side for Orlando, they remain unbeaten. Like, they are on the verge of history. This was one of their biggest tests. They have a big one coming up on October 6th as well against the Washington Spirit, which is going to be awesome to watch as well. And that's the team now closest to them. But for this Orlando team, did you feel like you learned anything of what we would see in a playoff setting, what we would see in a must-win final type of situation for this group?
I think they asked a lot of questions out of Kansas City. Like I said, the best saves were coming from Kansas City's goalkeeper, not from Anna Morehouse, which I think gives you a little bit of this Orlando team can allow teams to have possession and then really do a good job of creating a good goal scoring chance in whether it's through a little bit of possession, but most likely through a quick change of the progression through the lines, not necessarily a counter attack, but how quickly can we get into the attacking third and create. I think that they're finding their groove with McCutcheon, Angelina centrally, and then Marta as a floater.
Yep.
Because Marta at times was picking up the ball behind them, but behind both of those, I would call them eights. Like, I wouldn't call them true sixes because of the way that they play. But Marta would come all the way back and pick up the ball. And this is when they feel most dangerous, because who the heck is going to pick up Marta when she's all the way there? And it's just confusing for an opponent, and that confusion can lead them to really good attacks. And I think I'm not worried about it. Like, they're still undefeated, but Banda's not scoring like she was scoring.
Yeah.
And I think that for them, they have to figure out a way to unleash that. So maybe is it Marta floats less, and you try to get a little closer to Banda to create some kind of combination play and pull players around through that, as opposed to making that space between those two wider. Just a thought, because right now, going into the last part of season, I think you want Banda to be scoring goals as you hit the playoff mark. It doesn't have to be every game, but she needs a couple goals here.
Teams have adjusted. Teams are. I think that's part of why Ball got the start, right? You basically played two center backs on the right side, where Banda likes to get into that channel and likes to pick up the ball, and that's her safe space of, like, for Orlando, they know they can drop a blind ball down the left wing or into the left channel, and Banda's going to get there. Kansas City didn't allow that. Other teams won't allow that. I don't know if it's Marta getting closer, or I think what Marta recognized over the second half of this game, which you see the double save she forces late in this one, is actually there's going to be a gap, and she just has to dominate that space and shoot from distance. And, you need to force, if a defensive midfielder is going to drop a little and get close to their center backs to help on Banda and help on Summer Yates and, like, all the space that's there, then Marta needs to dominate the middle of the field. And I thought in the beginning of the game, or the first half of the game, she tried to get out and transition more. And it's like, you kind of need to be a true 10 in that space and say, if you're not going to step to me, like, I'm going to kill you from this spot until someone comes out and marks me. And it took a little while to get there.
Yeah, which might also hit my point, right? If that happens and she dominates that space, well, now you shift players and a combo could be on. And
Yes,
maybe it doesn't
100%.
get Banda on the score sheet, but maybe it gets her an assist.
Right.
And then the next time you're so worried about Marta that you don't have a double team on Banda and she can get that half a step, which is all she needs in order to get a really powerful shot off.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
that's a good point, Goss.
I think Banda has created such a threat this year that like you are always going to force a defense to make a decision on this team right now, the way these players are playing. And I think Marta has the ability to pull it all out of it. It's just different maybe than the way she had been playing for most of this season. And I think Kansas City probably set a little bit of a model here of how to go out and try and play against Orlando. At the same time, not everyone has a Schwinga. Like, not everyone has these options. Let's talk about two of the notes from this game. So, one, you mentioned Anna Morehouse. 11 shutouts on the year. She ties the single season record in NWSL. I think we did this 2 months ago where I said, who do you trust more? Who do you like more? And at the time, you said Orlando because of Anna Morehouse in the back and the way she has played for this team. What have you seen that has changed this team's ability to probably win a shield with her in this back?
Yeah, she made some really good. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Wow, what's going on? Something's happening.
As long as it doesn't come through the ceiling.
Yeah, let's hope not. Oh, okay, little construction. Okay, well, I'm gonna remember what I was talking about. Anna Morehouse. She has done a really good job of, I think, her and her back line, because shutouts are not just goalkeeper stats, right?
Love it.
This is
Love
a
it.
defensive
Respect
stat.
the back line.
This is a defensive stat. And I think what her defense has been able to do is make things pretty predictable for her. But I feel like her timing is really right. There was a chance with Schwinga coming at her, and she comes off her line, and I don't even think she gets a touch, but she makes Schwinga go around her, and then
saved
Schwinga
the game.
It was an incredible moment to come off your line and be brave. So I think moments like that, she's a little bit more confident in herself because she understands her back line and what they can and cannot get to. I think she just knows where shots are going to come from. And the predictability of it allows her to shine as a goalkeeper because she's a good shot stopper. She's a big frame. She can cover her goal. And I think that in and of itself has been the change of the stability of the back line, their predictability, that they give her a look at wherever the shot's coming from, and so she can make the big save.
Yeah, that moment was the whole game, because if Schwinga scores, it's like the 44th minute.
Yeah.
You get the goal, you get the momentum. Now Orlando like all the things we just talked about of optionality and Marta getting into space, all that stuff goes out the window because Kansas City now is going to sit super deep. They're going to put Schwinga up top. They're going to play in transition. Like, that was the biggest moment. And as you said, I don't think she touches the ball, but her body shape is perfect in pushing Schwinga wide, understanding that she didn't need to make the whole play, that defenders were recovering. Because a lot of times you see a goalkeeper say, I got nothing to lose. Like, I'm going to go through this and hope the ref doesn't call it. And that wasn't the play. That wasn't the need in that moment. And to recognize that, I thought was huge. And there's not really much Schwinga could do after that. Like, the angle gets tight. There's now two defenders in the goal, so it's not an open goal. And Morehouse got off the ground quickly and was back in the play. And so it wasn't like Schwinga could pull it back and lay it off. It was a huge moment and a big game, and it led to Schwinga's goal scoring streak to end. It was 8 games in a row going into this. That is now
fun.
That is over. It was awesome to watch. It's been amazing because we talked about it a little bit before we came on. Kansas City's numbers have fallen off in terms of, like, they were putting up 5 goals and dominating everyone in the first half of the year. And everyone's personal numbers have fallen off. And Schwinga has carried them to mediocrity over the last few weeks to keep them alive in the Shield race. I thought she was phenomenal in this game once again. You saw why I think she might be the best player in the league this year and is in the MVP conversation, will probably win the Golden Boot, but didn't hit the back of the net and so broke that streak.
And I think because she was so good in this game, I think that's why I said Corey Dyke was the player of the game, because Corey Dyke did a really good job of containing her and being the cover defense if need be. But most of the time, that first defender that is on Schwinga and making it predictable for the players around her. But yeah, Schwinga has been... It was fun to watch. It was a 0-0 game, and for me, I enjoyed it still. I thought there were still moments where I was very impressed by both sides, but this is going to be the difference, right, in a playoff. And so it did feel like a little bit of a playoff game where both teams didn't want to take too many risks because they know what is for them. For Orlando, they don't want to lose.
Yeah.
And for Kansas City, they don't want Orlando beating them again. So it felt like there was a little hesitation from both sides.
We don't bet here at SoccerWise, but if we were doing a SoccerWise bet, SoccerWise tokens, or apparently I've been told the first set of SoccerWise t-shirts have been sent out. So anyone who subscribes to our Patreon at the highest level, our MVP level, is going to receive a t-shirt. So if you have not heard yet, reach out to Charlie Fiction on Discord. We do not have more to give out, but you should still join because we will do more stuff like this.
Oh, yeah.
So you should subscribe immediately, and you can get into our Discord. You can get into the mailbag episode every week. You can chat NWSL with us, U.S. Women's National Team, all those things as well. So I'm going to bet you an imaginary SoccerWise Discord or SoccerWise t-shirt here. If you were putting it on the line, do you think this is the final that we see this year in Kansas City for NWSL Cup?
No.
Okay. Would you have said the same thing after the first matchup going into the summer break?
You know I've been high on Spirit for a while.
Okay. All right.
I think it would have been harder to say that after that game than it would have been this game. But, yeah, no. Well, it's a no for me. What's it from you?
I don't know.
The X factor is Kansas City's hosting.
Yes. But they would not host. What's odd is they would not host to get there, right? They're only hosting
as of right now.
Yeah, right.
As of right
they would
now.
need to earn the right to host until the final.
The second spot.
Right. So they're like
first or second.
The two questions we could ask is if Kansas City gets there, would they win it? We could feel confident about that, but will they get there is the other side of the question.
Yes.
Because the belief right now, I think, is in Orlando. And like I have said it over and over, this amoeba style that they can play of like they can be more possession, they can be more defensive. They beat everyone both ways. The Washington Spirit are coming downhill right now. We're going to talk about them in just a moment. But I like what I saw from Kansas City this week. I thought the last 7 days were bounce back, the win over Utah and this performance, and to get beyond the field at the end of this game. They're playing the Washington Spirit this weekend, so we're going to have an answer to this in about 4 days.
She's my... If they have Bia, I see them being in the final.
Okay.
If they don't, I don't see them in the final.
She's the Caroline of this year, or maybe just Caroline is the Caroline of this year, and Bia might be as well. We're going to talk Washington Spirit because there's a lot of excitement there, as there should be, but let's go sad first. Let's talk about Portland. The Portland Thorns losing 1-0 at home to Chicago. They have now lost all 4 matches since the Olympic break. There was a CONCACAF win in that stretch. They beat Club America, and they will face off against San Diego later tonight in CONCACAF W Champions Cup action. But this week it was the 1-0 loss to Chicago at home. So 2 of those losses have been at home. This to Chicago and then Bay 2 weeks ago. And for Portland, I think there was a good amount of excitement. Sophia Smith coming off a gold medal. Sam Coffey coming off a gold medal. They finally got healthier. Time under your what was interim and now full-time manager. What do you make of what's gone wrong over the course of this month or what's gone wrong in Portland in general?
Yeah, it's multifaceted. I feel like one of the things that I think goes against them is teams have figured out how to manage Sophia Smith in moments that they're not as risky with the numbers they send, knowing that if you give Smith any kind of room, it doesn't matter if she's in front of 5 defenders, she can find a way. I just think teams have done a better job of getting pressure cover, pushing her to the place that they want for her to go, and just disrupting her being a part of the game for long periods of time. I think that's one of the things. So that goes on the opposition, right? For Portland, I think they have been their worst enemy in a lot of the games. You know, it's a bad back pass in this one that gives Ali Schlegel a layup. It's a penalty that they gave up to that Mallory Swanson did not hit a convincing penalty, and it gets saved. But that's 2-0 to us.
Right.
Against Chicago, who doesn't score goals hardly ever, right? And I think that this Chicago team plays exactly the way that Portland is struggles to break down is they're compact. They don't let you have space in behind. They're okay with you having possession. And I thought that it was difficult in those moments for Portland when they don't have space to let Sophia Smith run into or play a little bit more direct. At times, they really struggle to find the answers to pick a lock for a defense. And so to me, that's what it felt like. Just it's not to say that there weren't chances, because there were. And I think getting Morgan Weaver back is really going to help take some attention off of Smith. But it just doesn't feel like they have the mojo that they used to have.
And I like the pickup of Spanstra, and I think it's worked to an extent of when she's had 1v1 chances because of the focus on Smith, she's been dangerous on the wing. She's gotten crosses in, she's earned them corner kicks. There is not enough connection, though, to midfield. There is not enough connection across the team. You talked about picking the lock. Like, this game was a perfect example of it, of Chicago kind of exposed themselves. Like, they don't have true center backs. They played Grosso as a defensive midfielder. They played 4 forwards, in theory, in this game. And I thought some of those ideas were really good. I thought the front 4 for Chicago pressed, counter-pressed, shadow marking, which not something we've talked about in the past, but like an ability of an attacking player to keep the player you want to pass to in the line behind them so that the passing angles aren't always there. I thought a lot of that was good, but Portland beat that fairly often. And then the midfield didn't have ideas of how to break lines into the back line. And they didn't have ideas of how to get Smith and Sinclair into dangerous areas. Yeah. And I maybe the hope was that Coffey would solve all of that on her own coming back into the team. I think that's an odd expectation. And I think it's tough to say it's on Moultrie's shoulders. Like, that's a young player to ask to do that. And I think they've been better with her on the field than they were without her when she was out hurt. But it just feels like too much. And at some point, Rob Gale has to set them up in a way in which less responsibility falls on individuals to just play make in space.
It feels like, to me, Rob Gale, one of the biggest thing that he changed when he took over this team early in the season is he didn't want the wingers to play so inverted. And they weren't playing inverted like we see. I'm trying to think of what team I can give you an example of.
Like Savannah DeMillo?
Yeah, like Savannah DeMello for Louisville, where she comes inside and she is another 10, right? They were playing inverted on the front line. So they were basically making the field smaller in moments where they shouldn't. If you're going to play true wingers and let them stay a little bit wide. And I think that is what he wants from them. But I think the Savannah DeMello model of bringing in a player from the wing, like they did with Crystal Dunn last year, would help them overload that space and then connect with Sinclair. Let Sinclair be a little bit higher. Smith can then isolate. But you need Mueller to be able to get down the wing, and that would also allow her to get into the attack and be a little bit more a part of it. I think that it's a small tweak, and it's not really Spanstra's game. Can it be Weaver's game? Can it be Sophia Smith's game, where she comes into that pocket and is a 10, and then she's running downhill with a player to connect, and Sinclair or Weaver, whoever in front of her? I just think that is a tweak that they could utilize, because they can have possession, they can break through a press, but they need numbers in better spots when they get forward in order to keep it into the final third, to create something out of the hard work that they've done, because that's where they have been so good for so long, and that's where the mojo is not there, right? They get there and it feels like sometimes they're grasping at straws, or it's one runner in the box and you're like, what is going on here?
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of disconnection in those moments, and it's funny because when I watch this team play, it's the way I would build a team of, like, I love short passing possession players. I don't like people who create goals. I don't like goal scoring moments. Like, I like control. I like possession. And this team's really fun in those moments, or has all the building blocks in those moments. But you go back and look at winning an NWSL Cup 2 years ago, and like the ability to either pull a back line higher and play in transition for Smith to play over the top, and then that starts to stretch teams out and create space. It hasn't been there. I still go back to, like, I think Smith should be the center forward.
Yeah,
I do too. Allow her the freedom to do all of these things. So I think it's harder coming off the left wing.
Could you play Sink as a 10 and Moultrie as a winger?
Yeah. Or you could
know
play
they
a four,
tried
or
that.
you could call it a 4-4-2 and say
You could-
like,
yeah.
we're gonna play Weaver and Spanstra on the wings and two true forwards up top, and Sophia Smith then kind of becomes the 10, right? She's the second forward. I think you get stuck sometimes in the cross between we need a center point that holds center backs and is always an option as that center forward that you want. And if Smith's dropping in and playmaking, she's not that. But I also think coming from the center position, Smith can be the most dangerous because there's the most optionality for her to drop in and attack or be played over the top or be played through into the channel or go wide and then attack 1v1. But you need to have that optionality and that pivot. I would say Chicago actually showed that a lot in this game, which is Swanson was the 10 across this front four in which everyone in the front four played all four spots. We've seen Joseph work pretty hard and like isn't the most dangerous in the final third, but will pick up different positions.
Yeah.
Ludmilla, I thought, was phenomenal in this game. I think what I thought Grosso would bring in can hold the ball in dangerous areas and get you out of pressure. Ludmilla brings all of that as well in the defensive third and the attacking third, and also comfortable playing up high, playing out wide, dropping in. And so there was a ton of rotation. I thought that rotation made Chicago more dangerous because you didn't know where players were going to be and you didn't know where they were going to pick up the ball. And Portland doesn't have that right now. So they're not breaking lines out of midfield. There's not a ton of movement out of the front. There are not obvious overloads that keep coming and coming where, okay, you feel like the dam is going to burst. And then any mistake against them becomes a loss, right? All of these mistakes that teams make in games, half chances given up, even the Moultrie pass back, it's not the worst. Like it was not a gift. Schlegel still had work to do, had to recognize it. You've got still a goalkeeper and a defender closing, but like those half things become losses right now for this team. And it feels hard to see them really pull themselves out of it. And so you probably are going to see something drastic, I think, from them formationally or tactically at one point just to try and break this whole thing.
Yeah, I was staring there for a second. I got lost in what you were saying because I was thinking, how could this team play?
Yeah.
How could you? They have Obeys and they could play. They could play three center backs and place Becky Sauerbrunn as the central of those center backs. Play a 3-4-2-1. I mean, there are options here for them, for sure.
So tonight is the CONCACAF match against San Diego.
You think they'll tweak things?
It seems like the right place to do it.
Yeah.
But my question for you is this. San Diego got a win this weekend. It feels like the playoffs and a championship run for San Diego is probably out the door in 2024. Like, is this the competition for these two clubs? Is this not the place to tweak? And is the NWSL matches the place to tweak because this is their chance to move themselves into a final?
That's a really interesting way to think about it. I think I got to talk to Lana Donovan last week before a game. We mentioned this in the broadcast, is that these first two games, the game over the weekend against Utah and then this game today for CONCACAF, he was considering those the two big games of the week. It's a 3-game week for them, but those two games had the highest of importance. And so it does feel like to me for San Diego, they know that this could be with this kind of competition, right? It's a different format and wins there can really help propel you to a knockout round and et cetera, et cetera. That can you have good performances here? I think you're right. Do you tweak in these moments? I don't know, but I think for San Diego, they feel more comfortable in what they're doing. As far as when it comes to Portland, I don't think they have confidence, and it doesn't feel like there's confidence. It doesn't feel like there's swag about when they get on the field, they're going to just play you off it, and that is how Portland has always felt. So it kind of feels like for them, they're not in a terrible place in the league, right? Like, why wouldn't you then use CONCACAF as a way to tweak some things against NWSL competition? And then hopefully if they could find something tonight that could work, then, these last 6 games for them, who's to say they can't go and win?
Yep. Still in a playoff spot right now for Portland, sitting in 6th right now in the league. They play Angel City on Monday night, another Monday night game. Don't really understand it, but that's fine.
Are you ready for some football?
Exactly. But they're in a situation where they are right now 2 points above the playoff line. So they could fall to 8th this weekend. Sorry, they are 5 points above the line, 2 points above 8th with Bay FC. So Louisville and Angel City are chasing them. The CONCACAF thing is the one weird part about it is like the semis are in May. of next
Yeah.
year and the finals in May. So it's not exactly like, okay, it salvages this full season, but like that's sort of the point of other competitions a lot of times is like, okay, some teams will focus here, some teams will focus here. Like,
Yeah, we see that in the men's game because there's Open Cup and there's Leagues Cup, and like you can say, hey, we're gonna put a lot of eggs in this basket to say, hey, it's not going well in league, but Open Cup, we're gonna try to get to the final.
And
we're
if you
gonna try to make something of it.
and if you're a GM or a coach, you can walk away and say, like, we made a fun. Like San Diego, I mean, if they get out this year, in theory, they could say we won Commissioner's Cup and we are into a semifinal of CONCACAF, which I think would be a kind of a ridiculous thing to do, but they would do it because that's their job and that's what they would do. I don't know that it saves Landon Donovan's job or gets Landon Donovan the job because I don't even know where he stands right now and where that whole conversation is, but it's something to salvage a season. It's an opportunity. I think it makes tonight's game a little bit more interesting. Gotham plays against Monterrey, I believe, tomorrow night in CONCACAF play as well. So something to keep an eye on. Let's talk about that playoff line, right? Portland are sitting in 6th. They are right above this fray. Everyone else is coming after them. Let's start with Louisville because Louisville made the trades and they specifically said we did it to be competitive and make the playoffs this year. And both players coming out of the trade score this weekend, come from behind win over Angel City. Balser gets the opening goal. Becky gets the second goal. So Angel City had the opener in like the 20th minute or so, a little bit against the run of play. And then Louisville are able to come back and they're able to get the result. The opening goal from Balser is like,
so good.
you talk about a player being the best header, and you're like, okay, well, that only matters here. No. And she's so good at it that it expands the realm of how it can affect the game. And it's an unbelievable moment. The chip ball in is like outside of what you're normally going to do because no one else can really finish that. So it's not really something the backline's worried about. Like Gordon is shifting to play because the game is going to Angel City's left and to Louisville's right. And all of a sudden this clip ball comes in. It's a header basically from the 18 and it loops into the far post. And Balser knows the entire time what she's doing. And it's an unbelievable moment. And it's one of those where like, okay, this is the relief of having a goal scorer. Like we don't have to grind for this. And now we're in a 1-1 game.
I'm going to give Bev Yanez so much credit because during Summer Cup, she tweaked with how this team was going to build and what they were going to look like in attack. And so now they're building out of 3-2, and they have 3 back line players, and now Aaron Wright is back in a center back, which I think is going to help them. They have Courtney Peterson, who they also got in the summer window, a left-footed outside back who played wing back for Houston, so she can get forward, but she knows that she has responsibility to stay. So now you have 3 really good ball-playing players in the back. In front of them is Flint and Ari Borges, and those are not 6s. Well, I'll just remind you, those 2 players are not 6s. Taylor Flint has been a 10 her whole life, and now she's playing in a 6 position. So she has, she told us a couple of weeks ago when we got to talk about her, she's like, I like playing risky passes, and I like doing cheeky things. And now she's doing it from a position with so many players in front of her. So now it's a 3-2-5 for Louisville, and they throw Lauren Millay up, and DeMello tucks inside, and those 2 have a really good combination on the right, which is hard for teams to defend. But now you have, this is why I think it works so well too, is you have these 2 6s and Borges and Flint who are distributing space around them and everybody in front of them. And they're creators. Yeah. And so Ari Borges playing from a deeper spot allows her to say like, you guys are silly. You think I'm going to play the right because that's how we're always playing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip it against the grain because I am a creative mind with every single pass in my bag that I can play. It just works so well. Now you have a goal scorer. Now you have Janine Becky who can balance you out. Now playing on the left side, cutting inside to her right foot. All of these things work. Or sorry, left side. Yeah.
Yeah, you said it.
Yeah.
Lefts and rights are
cutting
on,
inside
on
to
point.
her.
Yeah, you're right.
Whatever. So it's working for them. And I think all credit to Bev Yanez because she built a foundation with them, but then she said, we can tweak this and we can be even better in the way that we go forward. And they're scoring goals now. And I think they're going to be a team to watch as this last 6 games unfold. It wouldn't surprise me if they are in the playoffs when all's said and done.
And we questioned a little bit. You mentioned the trade for Peterson. I believe it was on the last day of the window.
Yeah.
When it was open of Carson Pickett leaving and not having a true left back. And they ended up, they made $30,000, I think, in allocation money across those two moves and still have an option at that left back spot. And I think even if you're saying, maybe less versatile, but now you have Becky out there as well, who's great 1v1. Yeah. And I think you see for that central midfield for Louisville, sometimes when you have players who come a little bit deeper, they don't want to eat up the space in front of them, and they actually get uncomfortable with how long they have on the ball. But I think you're seeing for both the players for Louisville is like, I can pick my head up and scan the entire field and choose to do whatever I want. And they're playing a lot of line-breaking passes centrally, which is dangerous, but it's what exactly we talked Portland not doing. It doesn't, you disorganize backlines, and at times it's for a bounce, right? It's played into DeGrande's feet and it's bounced right back to them. Yeah. But it just starts rotations and it starts movements and it's dangerous. And it creates that moment where Borges has now set the, chessboard and is like, well, this is how I keep playing and I won't do it this time.
Yeah.
It was awesome to see. And then the second chance comes off a pressing moment for them. But I think it's in a way in which their backline was not high enough up the field for them to even be in those situations for large parts of the season. I think overall, they're going to be happy with the moves they've made and the push they're making. You can question big picture if putting it all in for 8th place this year is the right move, but
it is, Goss. This is why it is this year, because they've finished 9th in every single year that they've been in NWSL.
Yeah.
So to finish 8th in 8 playoff spots, I don't think it'll matter for them, especially if they're playing like this, and because they're going to have to work to get there, right? They're going to have to get on some kind of run to get there, and to me, that's where you want to be when you go into playoffs. You want to feel like you are starting to peak, right? You're on the up. So I do think it's worth it. And that is not everybody's mode of operation. But for Louisville, I think it was theirs this year.
And in fairness, it's not like they went and got players who are 35 and not going to play anymore.
Right.
But they gave up Howell. They gave up some allocation. They made some big moves. The run here for Louisville, they host North Carolina this weekend. They travel to Utah in the next 2 games. That probably has to be 4 points. However you want to slice it, that's probably the necessity out of those 2 games. If you get there in that moment, then I think you take a ton of confidence and you say, we can get this done. They finish in a tough way. It's Kansas City and Washington right after that, and then Portland and San Diego to close. But, if you can get 4 points over the next week plus, I think you'll feel pretty good and you'll feel pretty confident about making the run into the bottom of this playoffs. And the team they are chasing is Bay FC, who, when we did our draft of alternating and who we picked, we never really touched on them because neither of us were that excited about what they had. They didn't make a ton of moves, which is fine because they made a lot of moves to build the roster and there was belief, but there wasn't really a clear path forward. Obviously, they bring in Abby Dahlkemper, which is a big move, having her come home. And, we've heard about how it's revitalized her and we've seen it out there on the field as well. So 3 straight wins right now for this, 3 undefeated for this Bay FC team. They go to North Carolina. They get the 1-1 draw in this match. It's only the second time North Carolina has dropped points at home this season. So for Bay to do it in their first ever matchup against this club, coming cross country on a Friday night, it was impressive. And they were, I thought, the better team in that first half. They got out to the lead. They make a mistake to allow the chance back, and Ashley Sanchez takes it really well. But what have you seen different from this Bay squad?
Yeah, and this was their first draw of their existence.
No
They have
way.
not drawn a game. Yeah.
That's absurd.
They've
I didn't
won-
even think to look for that because I wouldn't have even thought about
and
it.
they've lost. They've never drawn a game. And this is why.
All right,
this
go
is why
for
they've
broke.
never drawn a game. Because at the beginning of the season, Albertine Montoya said, go attack. I don't care how you defend. Just go attack. We're not talking defensive principles. Then halfway through the year, he spoke defensive principles. And what happened? They went from winning all these games, 4-3, 3-2, really high scoring games on both sides, to then losing a couple. They insert defensive principles. They also lose Alex Loera. They're trying to figure out who's going to sit in the midfield. And then for about 6, 7, 8 games, they struggled to score because they were so focused on defensive principles that they couldn't figure out how to attack. And one of the things that I feel like over the last handful of games, they are they understand what is being asked of them, but they're not robotic in the way that they're doing it, offensively or defensively. And Albertina Montoya has allowed them to learn about how to problem solve in games. So then when situations arise, they can make that decision on the field. But they've also done some things tactically that are different. They're now playing with 2 holding midfielders most of the time in builds. Dorian Bailey's coming back. She's helping them have more outlets in shorter balls, but the addition of Dahlkemper can't be understated, right? Because she can play short, but she can also release going long. So now there's a duality to the way that they can build. And the other thing that I feel like they have done a really good job of is just understanding what the opponent is presenting them, staying tight between their lines. But I think the way that they played against North Carolina is not something that we have seen from them. They pushed to North Carolina builds with a box or really like a trapezoid in the midfield, right? Like they don't tuck in their 10s. They kind of let them float into the half space. And so they pushed Bailey and Bodie all the way to the 2 6s for North Carolina in their build. And that made then Dahlkemper or a lot of the time Menges have to step out of the back line and almost become a midfielder to deal with Sanchez at moments. But they were more interested in stopping the build than they were at letting them build and dealing with it when it got there. And so I thought that was really gutsy from Albertine Montoya and the whole group. They managed the game plan pretty well. And it shows you their understanding of like, okay, now we know both sides. It's coming together. Now we can problem solve. And it just feels like their spaces between their lines are tighter vertically and horizontally. So it's harder for teams to play through them or through the seams. And it gives them the opportunity to do what they want to do and have numbers in good spaces when they do go and attack in transition moments, which has always been their bread and butter. That's where they score goals, in transition.
And it's where the goal came from this time. But you saw, I think, the addition of Bodie already being in the attack, in which you had 4 players. And so now North Carolina is down 1 in that transition moment. It comes off a bad turnover, so it's not, like North Carolina's perfectly set up for it. But you saw the 4 players in the high attacking position. Kundananji wins it back, immediately plays forward. And now while North Carolina's struggling to recover, Bay already has the options in there and already has the danger. So it's been really interesting to watch. It's interesting the way you talk about it in that now I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I was seeing and this is how it definitely went down. And it was one of those moments in which Ashley Sanchez was asked about it at halftime. Like, you're going over into that right channel. Is that where you think the game is? And she said, well, they're not giving us any space in the middle. And that lack of space wasn't because they were sitting in with the deep block. It was because those center mids were pushed higher and weren't allowing them to play through the 2 6s. Denise O'Sullivan was not able to get the ball in there and play straight through to Sanchez. Sanchez had to go and find the game. It works on the goal.
Which is what you want.
Exactly. It works on the goal, and it's like, if that, you're only going to concede 1 in a game against North Carolina if that's the type of chance you give up, and that's the whole situation. You also talked a little bit about with Portland changing up the fullback play and changing things. Mallinson's been really big in this shift.
She's been great.
Her comfort in being in possession has released Kundananji to be more dangerous. And so it is like what you said with Portland of like the little tweaks that can have the knock-on effect. Yes. This is the best stretch we've seen of Kundananji the whole season, like hands down. In the first half, she was the best player on the field. I think it's just the comfort of like Mallinson's going to either step in and help them build out so Kundananji doesn't have to drop in and be the option, or Kundananji knows she can just drop it down the line and it's a safe option, and then she can turn and run and get the ball into space. She was phenomenal in the first half, and that feels like a big piece of it. And I think that's one of those tweaks we've seen where Bay FC now have found just a half inch more in these games in which they were on the verge for large stretches of the season, and now they've been able to put together a really good run over the last few games.
Yeah, good shout out there to Mallinson because she's been great, and a player that barely got playing time in Seattle, and now we're seeing her step in and have a major role in a different team. Just speaks to expansion, the depth of this league, and there's going to be more of that to come. As we spoke about last week.
Goals in back-to-back games.
Yes, that's huge.
That's a dream situation.
It's huge.
And you could see the emotion, I think, for the entire team. Like when she has scored both these games, you see the entire team react and her emotion and all of that. there's a lot going on there, and it is very, very big. Final game of the weekend. Seattle, as I said, were the darlings in this race for the playoffs. 3 straight wins. They fall at home to Gotham on that Monday night. But before we talk about that game, really, we want to talk about Sofia Huerta, who was sent on loan to Lyon for the rest of this season, through the whole European season into next summer by Seattle, right at the end of the window, with the inability really to replace her. Huerta signed a contract extension, so is on the books for this team through 2027 now. So there really, it doesn't feel like a danger of her leaving permanently. This caught me by surprise. I talked about it a little bit on Monday. What do you make of this move and this timing and just like the moment?
It really, because it was after the window here that the loan got announced. So I think it caught everybody by surprise. But since it's a loan, that can happen, right? And
as long as the team the player is going to, the window is open,
exactly.
That's all that matters.
Right. So I feel like, and this is just me reading like the writing on the wall. This has not been an easy season for Seattle.
No.
They have struggled. And Sofia Huerta has been sitting on this assist number for over a year. Like, she has just been waiting for the moment to
scoring goals.
Yeah, but break this. So I think there's a lot of talk there. How is she contributing? She's done a good job to lead this team, but I also think when you're in a situation that is difficult, as it has been in Seattle this year, you're looking for other things. And when Lyon comes and knocks on your door and says, hey, we would love to have you, and the season isn't going right, I feel like the timing feels weird, because Seattle started playing well these last few games, but this has probably been in the works for a long time.
The move doesn't come together in 6 days. Yeah,
I just feel like this is, you can't turn this down. It's a great opportunity to play in a league where you're going to learn a lot about yourself in a foreign country. You're going to be playing in Champions League, all these things that as a player you dream about. So I think it's a smart move for Sofia Huerta. And yeah, I think Seattle has her heart, and I can imagine her coming back there and playing there. But it makes sense too for the move. Like the Hannah Glass move didn't really make sense to me when that happened from Kansas City to Seattle. But now I understand, because now you have an outside right back that can slide in, who it hasn't gotten a lot of playing time off of an injury, and now it is probably going to get that and give you some stability there. But it'll be interesting from Seattle, especially after the loss over the weekend to Gotham at home. Monday? Weekend?
Yeah, Monday night. It was a 3-day weekend for no one
but us.
But that's the vibes that you get from a Monday night game.
Yeah.
I that's sort of what I echoed on Monday, was like, honestly, it feels like with the Glass move, they actually probably had to get the roster numbers right before the roster freeze date and all of that. The part that's hard to sort of reckon is Huerta will not be on the roster until next summer. Glass's contract runs out. Like, you're going to have to fill that gap in a way which feels slightly inefficient in a salary cap league, to be like, how much are we going to commit to this roster spot with knowing that the all-time leader in assists is coming back and is a major part of our team. The other thing is, Huerta can be flexible. Like, she was not a fullback earlier in her career. So maybe the idea is just, we're going to get talent and we're going to figure it out and we're going to move forward. It is a time of change for Seattle. And I think if you're, like you talked about, if you're honest, and Laura Harvey obviously is as good at this as anyone and has been honest about a lot of it, you can look at it and say, like, we don't really know who we are right now. Go have this experience, maybe become a better soccer player or a better leader or a better person, or this is the thing you want to do. We can't really look and say, like, no, let's make a championship run. You should be here, because that's not the reality of what this season has been. It feels like almost Seattle has let her down the first half of this year, and now you can't really hold her back if this opportunity comes. So it'll be interesting. The 2-0 loss to Gotham, I think, deflating for Seattle. Some of the things that worked weren't there. Jordan Heidema not being a part of things was obviously a massive loss. They lost the point of the attack. And so I think all of the all the good stuff we've seen from the now 2 wide players or from G, you lost the point to a lot of that, or you lost the focal point to a lot of that. And I thought Gotham looked pretty good. Rose Lavelle looked as healthy and as comfortable as we've seen for Gotham since the Olympic break. And it was a good performance for that team. And now Gotham's going to go to the White House. And we're the first NWSL team to go celebrate a championship at the White
Good
House.
transition.
Yeah, I know. I had something in the back of my head, and I was like, I was supposed to mention something, and that's what it was. Let's talk this weekend before we get out of here. And the big one we've mentioned a bunch of times, Washington against Kansas City. That one is Friday night at CPKC Stadium. Washington knocking off Houston 3-0. We're not going to dig into Houston here because we already did the sad stuff with Portland. So you can, I read Jason Anderson's piece about the weekend recap. I thought he touched on it really well. So go to Pro Soccer Wire and read all of that. But Washington coming in incredible form, facing off against Kansas City. This is mouthwatering to see because I think KC at home, they got to open up. Like they can't go and do what they did in Orlando. And if you open up with this Washington team, they'll go there with you. You want to play in transition. You want to open up the lines. Like, we'll bring all of our horses to Kansas and we'll get ready to ride for this one. And it's going to be awesome.
Esme Morgan started the last game for Washington. So I think I've spoke about it this whole year. Washington's if they are questionable, they're questionable along their back line, right? Their center backs have, I'm not quite sure if they're going to be able to hang with the big horses that are around in this league, right? Are they going to be able to run with Schwinger? Are they going to be able to manage Bia? This is the test that Washington needs right now as they are flying going forward. But Houston didn't test them, and I think that, you're playing at CPKC Stadium. You're going to get a lot of attack from this Kansas City team.
It is going to be very interesting first to see if Morgan's the one that starts because Washington had been playing well. And I think at some point it was like, all right, let's get Morgan the minutes. Let's get her in there. It's Houston at home. Like that's a really good spot to do it. So I'm curious to see what Heraldez does as what is his first options here. And then I'm excited because I think this will cement Trinity Rodman's MVP campaign in this match. It's Friday night, national TV against the third place team, against the Golden Boot leader in Schwinger. Like, you watch the form Rodman's in. You add in the narrative of now playing on the left large stretches because Corey Bethune went down injured. And obviously, Lacey Santos, a huge part of the replacement of Corey Bethune. But Trinity Rodman, it feels like, has elevated to another level. And then you throw in the little bit of Olympic gold stuff. And, like, people are not supposed to vote on that. They're going to vote on that. That's what happens. I think if Rodman remains on the streak she is on, and this team challenges for the Shield legitimately and is within 3 to 4 points of the top, I think there's a chance Orlando, everyone takes votes from each other because you're probably looking at a finalist for goalkeeper of the year, defender of the year, and potentially Golden Boot winner in Orlando. I think Rodman inserts herself into this convo, besides the fact that I think she will deserve it if she plays the way she's been playing.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at numbers right now. Rodman has 8 goals, 6 assists right now, correct?
Yeah.
And Banda has 12 goals. I don't know what Banda is at assists, but not very many. If she has some, it's minimal. I can't click that right now.
Let me see if I can find it for you.
That NWSL website is a real bugger.
12 goals, 5 assists.
12 goals, 5 assists. So I don't know. I hear
17 goals.
I hear you on Rodman. I do. I hear you. But if Orlando wins the Shield, there's no way Banda doesn't get get MVP. Unless Rodman goes, it's just hard.
So you think Washington has to win the Shield for Rodman to win it? With the way the season is set up right now.
Or she has to score more. She has to score more goals than Barbara Banda.
Right, yeah. It feels unlikely to think
just to
she's going to win the
We
boot.
talked about this when we were talking about the Ballon d'Or, right? That's what people are going to vote on. Do I think Trinity Rodman has been an MVP? And yeah, the girl is unstoppable. She's sleeping on players.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Oh, I would be so mad if she did that to me. But it is so fun to watch.
But if you get once you're in the trend spin, you don't even really notice the celebration.
I know. You don't.
You're just watching everything
you're
around
just
you.
Circling. Yeah, you've got those dizzy eyes from the cartoon characters. I think it'll be. It's hard to say. But I think it could be between those two, Banda and Rodman.
Yeah.
Those are my final two. Final answer.
Yeah, I think Schwinger will win the Golden Boot.
Me too.
I
but
think
Kansas
Orlando,
City's not going to be high enough to win for her to be MVP.
Yeah. And it feels like Orlando will win the Shield, but I'm just putting it now. I'm putting my flag in the ground because I want it before Friday night when Rodman has a goal and an assist in a 3-2 win at Kansas City in the best game of the year. And then all of a sudden Orlando falters, and now they're within one game, and we're going into October 6th, and they've got the opportunity to take the first place.
Maybe we should just stop calling these games, like stop hyping them up to be so big, because the ones we hype up are like,
yeah.
But I do think it'll be a good game. You should watch it, everybody.
Yeah, you should absolutely watch it. It will deliver. I will say this, Washington has delivered. Geraldes has his principles. They have a style.
Yeah.
You talked about the center backs. They can't really move away from it in a lot of ways, and they're good enough to not have to. Like, I think Washington will come and play, and I think they will open up the game. I hope the referee doesn't ruin it. Not saying that the referee ruined it in the Orlando game, because, like, that was a red card, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I'm just throwing that out there. Friday night has, I think, our second best game as well. Bay FC against Orlando. That's the doubleheader. We just talked about it with Bay. Like, they're on this run. They look really good. Okay, here's the ultimate test. Here is the best team in the league. Here's the unbeaten squad. And we're going to learn a ton about that team and their ability, as we just said, with all these tweaks, to be able to make a strong run at the end of the season. So that's going to be the weekend. We've got Monday night coverage again. And then I will be here with the weekend recap on Monday to walk you through everything I saw. I don't love the Monday night game because I like to be able to make like grander assessments of like, this is where everyone stand. Like, coming out of this weekend, it was Gotham could drop down the table. Seattle could have moved closer to the playoff line, and then you don't know. So it makes my life a little bit harder, let alone whoever has to work on a Monday night.
We'll talk to the schedulers. So we'll just talk to them.
We'll get them in with our T-shirts and our bets and all that stuff, and we'll get it done. So thank you to all of you out there for listening. Thank you, Jordan, for being here. We are excited for the rest of the week. Big weekend of NWSL coverage. Join our Patreon so you can get into the Discord and chat about all of it, and we will be back next week. We'll also be back tomorrow talking MLS. We'll talk to you all again very, very soon.